And good morning. Thanks for tuning in. Andrew here, our hurricane, which continues to strengthen. Pressure now down to 974 millibars. The Air Force plane is out there, and that's what the pressure reading that they extrapolated down to the surface has come in to be. And think about that. The 5 a.m. advisory was 994 millibars, and now we're down to 974. So that's a 20 millibar drop in quite a short period of time, and that does indicate right there, just from pressure alone, that we have a rapid intensifying cyclone here. Winds at 75 miles an hour. This is the 5 a.m. advisory again, 25.8, 67.5 west, 625 miles to the east of Nassau, or about 800 miles to the east, southeast of Miami right now. Again, it appears from the satellite indication that we do have a strengthening hurricane, and the new advisory should be in about 10 minutes or so. So we'll get that to you as soon as we get it in. All right, here's the infrared satellite picture. And what we've done is color the tops. And the reason we've done that is because we can show you the deep convection indicated by here, the yellow and the red. Now watch what happens as we go on in time. The yellow and the red wrap all the way around the center of circulation. And when those thunderstorms just keep developing and keep developing around the center like that, that's also another indication of a strengthening storm. And look what's happened in the past couple of hours here. A very, very definitive eye, even with the infrared satellite picture here. Now this is something that you really have to pay attention to, because we've got a strengthening hurricane. The forecast track takes it toward the Florida coastline within 72 to 80 hours. And that's about 2-3 days away here as we look at it. And, you know, granted, that is a long time away. It's something to watch, especially as we get up here to 75, perhaps even 100 miles an hour winds. So obviously something to watch here in time. This is the visible satellite picture. And as the sun comes up, you can get a very, very nice look at the eye. You can also see how bright these white clouds are around the center. That's what you saw with the yellow and the red on the infrared. This is the deep convection, the deep thunderstorms, indicating to us that we do have a strengthening hurricane. And it actually, if you plot where the plane is and where they are flying in the center of the eye, the thing has actually jogged more west than north in the past couple of hours. Interesting, you betcha. 75 to 85 miles away from the center. That's where we find the tropical storm winds all the way around the center and through here. So this is something that we're going to continue to look at for you and watch as it makes its way toward the Bahamas and also Florida, perhaps. And we'll have to, again, it's something that we have to watch. It's still 2-3 days away, but something obviously that is developing and could become a very big concern to Florida. All right, we look at the entire Atlantic for you. Away
Atlantic side, and Andrew is turning into a very strong storm, intensifying rapidly. Winds have gone from 75 miles an hour earlier this morning to 90 miles an hour. We have the 11 o'clock update. This is the way things look at this time concerning Andrew. If you're plotting, 25.9 north, 69 degrees west. Let's put the satellite into motion, color the cloud tops for you. Of course, the colors of orange and red indicate the highest clouds, which you can see wrapping in a cyclonic fashion around the eye, which is right in there. In fact, the eye has become much more well-defined during the past couple of hours, indicating that Andrew continues to steadily intensify. Here's a visible satellite picture beginning early this morning, just as the sun was coming up. But watch as the sun gets higher in the sky, how it's reflecting off the very heavy cloud cover around the center of Andrew. Again, the eye showing up very well right there, the eye wall surrounding the center of the storm. Andrew should continue its westward movement. Again, there's high pressure up in here, and it's going to force Andrew in a westerly direction for probably at least the next 72 hours. Already hurricane watches have been issued for the northern part of the Bahama Island chain, and that means, of course, that hurricane conditions are possible.
Well, we have a hurricane off each coast. In the Pacific, this is Lester threatening the Baja Peninsula of California. Might bring some rain up into the U.S. The one we're most concerned about, though, is Hurricane Andrew off the east coast of the United States. And I'll show you the latest particulars on that based on the Hurricane Center advisory. At 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, center at 25.9, 69.7. That's just 655 miles now, due east of Miami, Florida, and it continues to move just about straight toward the west at 14 miles per hour. Top winds now up to 95 miles an hour, and the barometric pressure is 974 millibars, or 28.76 inches. We can show you this picture in motion and show you an extremely well-developed hurricane, and you can follow that eye yourself as it moves on toward the west. Again, it's moving west in the general direction now of Florida at 14 miles per hour. We have another type of picture, and in just a second we'll load the colors for you here and show you what's going on. Right there is the center of circulation, and When these colors get loaded, we'll show you the very bright clouds associated with the highest tops. And you can also get your perspective here. You can see it's not that far from Florida. There are the northern Bahamas, and there you see this very well-developed eye on the hurricane as it moves on toward the west. Now, we don't have any watches or warnings out for continental United States. We do have some hurricane watches out, though. For the Bahamas, here's the wind field first. This is the hurricane force winds around there, and here are the tropical storm force winds extending out a good ways as this hurricane makes its way toward the west. Here are the watches now that are in effect, and just for the Bahamas, for Luther and Andros on up. A couple hurricanes, so you have the one that we're most concerned about, that's Andrew off the east coast. But we have another one off the southwest coast of the United States, that's Lester, that is off Baja California, and that's expected to cross over Baja California. Let's start in though and show you the latest particulars on Andrew, and I have some new information here with a little bit different coordinates than you see there. The west at just about 14 miles per hour. We can show you a different vantage point, a different satellite picture here, and in just a second these we'll colorize the tops and show you where they are. There's the center of circulation right there. There you can see it real well, and you can see it moving on to the west. It's getting pretty close now to some of the Bahamas, and there are hurricane watches out for the northern Bahamas, and we would anticipate that eventually here that a watch would be put out for some of that area.
What that means is that in the Bahamas, a hurricane is anticipated. A hurricane warning means that a hurricane is likely within 24 hours. And the reason they put the warning up now is at the rate that the hurricane is moving, we expect to see hurricane conditions over the northern Bahamas by late tomorrow night. In other words, on the order of 24 hours, maybe a few hours more than that. Okay, we have Dr. Bob Sheets at the National Hurricane Center now. Dr. Sheets, you with us?
Oh, he's going to turn it when she gets him? Okay.
Bob, can you hear me? All right, I'll tell you what, let's hold off just a second here, and I can hear Bob getting ready, but it's not quite ready. All right, so let's go over this one more time. A hurricane warning for the northern Bahamas, a hurricane watch from Titusville down to the dry Tortugas. Top winds with the storm at 100 miles an hour. Hurricane force winds extend out 30 miles an hour. And the tropical storm force winds, now you're going to hear a lot about tropical storm force winds because that means winds of about 39 miles per hour, and that's when a lot of things stop. Evacuations stop, Coast Guard help on the water stops, bridges stop, a lot of things stop, okay, at tropical storm force winds. Okay, now we have Dr. Bob Sheets at the National Hurricane Center. Bob, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. We put the hurricane watch up now for the Florida East Coast. At what point are you anticipating that somewhere along that coast we'll be experiencing at least tropical storm force winds?
Well, we're looking at putting up a warning probably sometime tomorrow morning with this movement that we have right now. The earliest that we would see tropical storm force winds along our coast would be sometime Monday morning.
All right, but possibly early Monday morning, right?
Well, it could be, and it depends on whether you got 13 knots of movement or 11 knots of movement. So 1 or 2 knots when you're looking 48 hours into the future makes quite a bit of difference in time. So we're looking at sometime in early morning, perhaps.
Okay, well, what I wanted to stress was that we need to get the preparations done tomorrow and not assume we have time on Monday to be doing things.
That's right. Assuming the storm continues to move on the speeds that we have now, that's the reason we had to move up the timing on this watch and warning process. Now, if it slows down to maybe 10 knots, then we'll have a little bit more time to prepare. But if not, then tomorrow is the time to take those actions.
Okay, you've been looking obviously at the models. You have the aircraft in the storm investigating it. Are we anticipating significant strengthening, minor strengthening? What's your call there?
It's a very small, tight storm. In fact, the eye has just popped out again. This is sort of a normal kind of cycle that you go up there, drop down about 970, 974 millibars, level it off, and now I suspect when the airplane gets in there again, which it will be in there momentarily, we're going to see deepening again. So we're recommending people prepare for a Category 3 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale. That means greater than 110 miles per hour.
Now, and you're also recommending to the emergency managers that Category 3 type evacuations take place?
That's correct.
All right, but that would not happen until tomorrow.
No, I think that it's time to wait there because if you get a slight change in direction, you may not have all of this area that's in the watch be affected.
All right, now the area, this high pressure area we've been talking about to the north, do any of the models indicate any potential weakening of that area that might deflect the system north?
No, I think that all models are in general agreement that it will be a basically westerly course. It might be slightly northwest, slightly southwest, and that's the reason for this watch all the way from Titusville through the Florida Keys.
Now, at how wide a distance, once we get the storm?
No, I think that all models are in general agreement that it will be a basically westerly course. It might be slightly northwest, slightly southwest, and that's the reason for this watch all the way from Titusville through the Florida Keys.
Now, at how wide a distance, once we get the storm closer to the coast and we get a good feeling of where it's coming in, obviously the closer it is, the better we know. When it gets there, we know, right? But how big a distance to the north and south are we talking about a significant storm surge situation?
Well, the storm surge itself will be concentrated over a distance of probably 40 to 50 miles, maybe a little bit more than that with a peak kind of surge. Of course, you're going to have wave action outside of that area. The problem is when you have this timing problem that we have right now, we're sort of 12 hours out of cycle phase of what I'd like to be able to give the daylight leading time there, we have to warn a little bit early, and that means our warnings have to be a little broader.
All right, I know you have buoys out there offshore measuring the swells coming in. Are we seeing swells yet approaching the coast from the storm?
I don't think so. It's a relatively small storm, so that means you don't get these big swells like we had from Gabrielle and some of the others. So we're not going to have those until the storm starts to get a little stronger and a little closer.
What was I'm trying to think in my head here, the last storm that was a little storm like this that came ashore?
Well, we've had strong...
Bob wasn't a big storm, obviously.
No, it was, Bob was a similar size to this particular hurricane, maybe slightly larger than this particular hurricane. Inez, 1966, some of those extreme storms that were there. Cleo was a very small storm that affected this area, but this is a little bit more than Cleo.
Okay. All right, well, that's a good gauge, and because we'll be looking back at those storms of the past, I'm sure. Bob, we'll be back with you again later on this evening. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Okay. All right, now, let's go over one more time.
And we're looking at hurricanes off each coast. We have Lester here off Baja, California, and of course the one we're really concerned about, this is Andrew. Seems to be heading steadily for Florida at about 15 miles an hour. We haven't seen a whole lot of change in that during the day. Here are the latest particulars from the National Hurricane Center. This issued at 5 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, centered at 25.9 north, 70.4 west, and that is 650 miles now, just about due east of Miami. Top winds up to 100 miles an hour and moving steadily westward at 15 miles an hour. We haven't actually had a pressure just lately from reconnaissance aircraft. We should have another one pretty soon. At that time, the pressure was 974 millibars, or that is 28.76 inches. Now, the best we can see, it's going to continue a path directly toward the west. We don't know exactly where it's going to hit precisely, but certainly we're concerned about the Bahamas, and we're concerned about the central part of Florida and the southern part, and even all the way across the peninsula, as this hurricane is likely to move on across, we do believe. This is the latest satellite picture, and you can see this well-defined eye moving steadily toward the west. We watched it get better organized all day, and now it is, as you can see, a pretty powerful hurricane. We have yet another picture, and this one will give you a bit broader view. There is the eye of the hurricane, and there you see the Bahamas, Eleuthera, Andros Island there, Eleuthera up here, and the Grand Bahama and Great Abaco. And here comes the hurricane headed in that general direction at a steady 15 miles per hour. As we take a little bit of a look to see what the wind field looks like, 85 miles or so is what the tropical storm force winds extend out, and the hurricane force winds extend out about 30 or 40 miles from the center. Now, we do have some watches and some warnings to talk to you about. The government of the Bahamas has issued hurricane warnings for Eleuthera, Andros Island up to Great Abaco, and on up to Grand Bahama. And a hurricane watch is now in effect from Titusville, Florida, through the Florida Keys or to dry Tortugas. It looks as if we'll be getting hurricane force winds in the Bahamas sometime tomorrow and sometime by early Monday along the Florida coast. So all you people there want to prepare for a hurricane, and it could be a pretty powerful hurricane by the time it gets there. Already it's powerful enough, and it's been a long time since you folks in South Florida have experienced a direct hit with this kind of a hurricane.
Hurricane watch is now in effect in Florida. Good evening. With winds of 100 miles an hour, Hurricane Andrew is heading towards South Florida. Team coverage begins with Channel 4 meteorologist Brian Norcross. Brian.
Okay, Jerry, here are the latest coordinates on Hurricane Andrew. These coordinates as of 5 o'clock. Now, we're going to get coordinates at least every 3 hours, and as the storm comes closer to land, we'll get them more often than that. But as of 5 o'clock, it's 25.9 north, 70.4 west. Top winds 100 miles an hour, moving to the west at 15, and west brings it right to Miami. It's 615 miles due east of Miami. This particular latitude is essentially the same latitude that we are right here. So if the storm continues on this path, and it is heading right down the pike of due west at this point, we expect that the storm is going to be in our neighborhood here by early in the day Monday, and possibly very, very early in the day Monday. Now, the central pressure, we have two numbers here, because some people like it in millibars, other people like it in inches. 974 millibars, 28.76 inches. And the other thing to notice here is that this number, the 25.9 north, is the same latitude that we had at 2 o'clock, and also that we had at 11 o'clock this morning. Now, we do have watches and warnings in effect. First of all, hurricane warnings in effect for the northern Bahamas, including Nassau, Freeport, that's Great Abaco, that's Andros Island, and Eleuthera. And what a hurricane warning means is that hurricane conditions are likely within the next 24 hours. And here's where the hurricane watch is in effect, meaning hurricane conditions are possible. So we're standing by here for more information. We'll show you what systems are affecting this and why we think it will not veer far to the north, if it veers north at all. Have that for you in just a few minutes, and we'll check in with the Hurricane Center. Jose.
Okay, Brian, thank you. With Hurricane Andrew now posing a direct threat to South Florida, preparations, as you can imagine, are essential.
Or it may be an indication of something to come. The odds that the storm is going to have a due west course, though, for the next 2 days is unlikely. Some change is likely to occur. One possible scenario would be that the storm would begin to curve back to the north. Again, it has a lot to do with this big high-pressure area to the north. Exactly how strong that is, how much is it going to push?
What we call a live feed for their news reports. Let's go now down the line where the other hurricane specialists are working in other areas. On this side over here, this is where the regular homegrown weather is done. During a hurricane, we still have to have reports on what the local weather is doing. This is the local National Weather Center here, which is just across the room from the National Hurricane Center. So the two of them are right next to each other. As we go down the line, this is basically the publicity area. This is where Dr. Sheets and the hurricane specialists who are giving the press releases and updates sit. They come to sit in front of that big monitor so that you at home can see what's happening on the satellite loops coming down from the National Hurricane Center system. Now, along here, you see all of the computers. This is where they can take the data that is coming in from the ships at sea, the satellite information that comes in, also, of course, the reconnaissance aircraft, feed information in. The various programs they have in these computers then analyze that data and give them a pretty good idea of what's happening with the storm dynamics. Now, right here, this is the bullpen. And here we have Miles, who is one of the hurricane specialists, going through some of the latest data, putting it into the computer and analyzing it. The phones you see back there are connected to the aircraft and the other reporting systems and other stations around the country and other systems around the world that report into the National Hurricane Center with data concerning what's happening with the storm in their area. Okay, that's what it looks like in the National Hurricane Center in the bullpen area right now. Of course, this is one of the satellite pictures that they're putting through the computer system right now and analyzing. So all we can tell you is it's going to be a very busy night here at the National Hurricane Center, and the war room that you saw, the TV pool area, and even this conference room is probably going to be elbow to armpit tomorrow with more TV people trying to get the word out on what Andrew is going to do. We're here already and already set up to keep you posted, so keep it right here on Channel 7 for the latest on what Andrew is going to do, what, when, and how hard.
Okay, thank you very much. Steve Adams.
As of 11 p.m., the hurricane is centered near 25.6 degrees north, 71.9 degrees west. And this position is about 520 miles east of Miami, Florida. The hurricane is moving toward the west at about 14 miles per hour, and the maximum winds now have increased.
A very, very intense hurricane continues to move to the west. As you can see with Hurricane Andrew, as of the 5 o'clock advisory, 25.5 degrees north, 73.4 degrees west, about 425 miles east of Miami, packing maximum sustained winds of 120 miles per hour, moving to the west at 16 miles per hour. And there's the minimum pressure way down if you have a home barometer. The Bahamas under the gun later this afternoon. There's going to be a tremendous storm surge here, and strengthening is indeed possible as Andrew will be passing over the warm Gulf Stream waters off the coast of Florida. And then again, Andrew could cross southern Florida or near the Keys and actually get into the Gulf of Mexico and pose a threat to the Gulf coastal areas over the next few days. So a lot to talk about here. We put the picture into motion. What you're looking here, where we've enhanced the infrared satellite picture, certainly you can see a well-defined eye and a lot of thunderstorm activity around the center of the storm as it continues to the west. It has wobble a little south, wobble a little north, but basically staying on its westward motion. It's increased in speed a little bit at 16 miles per hour and could very well make landfall somewhere in southern Florida over the next 20 hours or so. So you don't have much time to prepare for Andrew, to get out of where you are if you live in a low-lying area. And certainly the Bahamas will be affected this afternoon. The warnings, hurricane warnings, are out for most of the central and northern Bahamas, Eleuthera, Grand Abaco, and hurricane watches from Titusville, Florida, all the way down through the Keys to the Dry Tortugas. But then again, with the speed, the motion to the west at 16 miles per hour, Andrew could very well approach land before dawn tomorrow, and it could also come near high tide, so especially if it comes before, say, 5 in the morning. So we'll have to watch out for that. A lot of storm surge, and the biggest storm surge would be on the north side of a storm that would come in perpendicular to the coast. So wherever it comes, the storm surge would be to the north of
forecast.
Said we'll be issuing that within the hour, and exactly what areas there. And these things are quite complex that we have to coordinate with the emergency management officials, many counties, states involved, and other areas like that. And so you start having these rumors flying based on our conversations that are taking place. So that's what we're really doing, working out the finer details of that warning process.
Can you give us an idea of the general area that this warning is going to include?
Well, it's certainly going to be in that watch area that we talked about earlier. We're going to try to narrow that down a little bit, and within the hour, we'll be coming out with that warning.
When exactly will you have this warning for us?
It could be, as I say, within the hour, maybe as early as 15 to 20 minutes, maybe a half hour from now.
Do you feel it's important to get this warning out earlier than you thought before, so people will know a little bit sooner what they should do?
Well, again, you have such a complicated process that's taking place, then you start these rumors flying based on these calls that we make here, and so we'll try to get it out as fast as we can to make it fairly clear to what people need to do.
I know I've asked this.
This is a 7 News special report, the path of Hurricane Andrew.
Welcome back to our continued.
I'm Bob Sheets from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida.
All right, thank you, Bob. We have passed then a very important plateau in this nature crisis. We've gone from a hurricane watch to a hurricane warning.
Now, the difference again is this. The watch says get prepared, and the warning says you should be prepared for the strike. Okay, so let me just go through this once again and give it all to you, just in case maybe you missed it or you didn't get some of it. But here it is. Hurricane warnings have been issued for southeast Florida. Hurricane warnings remain in effect for central and northwestern Bahamas. At 8 a.m., hurricane warnings in effect for the east coast of Florida, from Vero Beach southward, all the way down through the Keys to the Dry Tortugas, including Florida Bay. Now, a tropical storm warning and a hurricane watch in effect north of Vero Beach at Titusville, Florida. Also, a hurricane watch is in effect for the west coast of Florida from south of Bayport, which includes the greater Tampa area and north of Flamingo. Now, if you have your map out at home, here is the very latest. 25.5 north and 74.1 west. That's only now 380 miles east of Miami. It's picked up a little bit of speed now. It is moving west at about 16 miles per hour, and this general motion should continue for about the next 24 hours. Now, hurricane conditions are expected in the northwest and central Bahamas. Egress, find all the different routes away from your house. So if one is crowded, you know where to go for a different exit. However, if you haven't done that, just get out any way you can. It's going to be crowded. It's going to be packed when the evacuation notices do come out. Now, let me give you the very latest that we have on Andrew, and here it is. 25.5 north, 74.1 west. That
Intense storm could be historically one of the strongest storms ever to approach southern Florida in terms of a hurricane. And the satellite picture shows it very well. Very strong Hurricane Andrew drifting off to the west at 16. You can see the spinning, the counterclockwise motion of the storm, the very compact eye of the hurricane. It's diminished in its diameter, as a matter of fact, from about 11 miles earlier this morning to 8 miles, which means the storm is spinning up and the eye is getting smaller, a sign that the storm continues to intensify. It's over very warm waters, and it is expected to continue to drift off to the west and could even strengthen further before it reaches perhaps southeast Florida sometime early Monday morning. That's why the Hurricane Center has put out a hurricane warning from Vero Beach down to Dry Tortugas. Warnings. That's it for the tropics. Another update at the top of the hour, but now let's go on to the Good Morning Forecast with Vivian.
Well, thanks, Rick, and we will check on the Good Morning Forecast, starting off with the national radar. And there you see wet weather already developing in parts of Arizona, so then the grounds are saturated. Any additional moisture can only promote flooding problems. That's why the National Weather Service has issued a flash flood watch for a good part of Arizona, western New Mexico, and Utah, because as the tropical storm's moisture moves north, that means additional
islands, either Abaco or Eleuthera, but once again, this is an unconfirmed report.
Well, I would not be at all surprised that first of all, I can't imagine that we have any communication with Eleuthera at this point.
Well, we do have
moved very close to Eleuthera, and will be moving fairly close to Nassau.
We do have Ed Odell in the Bahamas on the
him.
telephone. Ed, are you there?
Yes, I am, Jerry Bryan.
You hearing the reports about the report that we've got unconfirmed of 4 fatalities there in one of the outer islands?
Actually, I've been keeping my ear to news reports here in the island, and they have so far said absolutely nothing about that. But as with Brian,
Dade and Broward areas of Florida within the next few hours. I'm Bob Sheets from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida.
All right, 250 miles out now. You know, we have not done this in a long time, and I suppose we should go ahead and just go over the state of the storm, with the exception of the little change in mileage. Why don't we start with the tracking map, guys, and show them that, and then we'll show a brand new satellite picture. Reducing the mileage now, according to Dr. Sheets, to 250 miles. The operative numbers here are the wind speed and the direction of movement. Wind speed at 150 miles per hour. We cannot stress enough for anybody that thinks they've been through a hurricane. This is like no other hurricane ever recorded here in a metropolitan area.
And not just Florida,
not
anywhere.
just Florida, anywhere. There have been other hurricanes in the Pacific, but not affecting cities. On the United States coast, there have been other hurricanes.
No one has ever lived through, been through a storm like
this in a major metropolitan area. Now, in the Keys in 1935, there was a very, very severe storm that exceeded this in some ways. But this is the next one up from that. The latitude and longitude, all that tells you it is right on line with us. Again, whether I have Miami on the map there, but whether Miami is the central point of this, or whether Fort Lauderdale is, or whether North Broward or South Dade or wherever it is, we feel certain that the major impact of the storm is going to be in our viewing area here. So there is just actually those little fingers of clouds, and we'll look at the radar in a minute, but those little fingers of clouds are just approaching our coast out here. In fact, I'm wondering, on the Grove cam, can you guys go ahead and tilt up the Grove cam over there, Danny, so we can see the sky out toward the east, just to see if we can... well, it's still, I mean, look, getting a little breezy I can see out on Biscayne Bay. In fact, Brian Allen, what if you could give me I'd be interested in a local weather, you know, the top of the hour weather here for South Florida, just to see what the winds that we are reporting here and around the area. All right, now let's go back to that satellite picture, please, and notice where the eye is. The eye is just about to come ashore. In fact, this picture was taken probably about an hour ago now, so that eye may very well be ashore now at the northern end of Eleuthera. Those little fingers of clouds sticking out. Looks like that band of showers now right through the Biminis, another band, another weak band through Freeport, extending down to Andros Island. Clearly, we're in an area of a little bit of a lull right now in between these bands of showers, but once the bands start, we'll get them for a while, and then we may get another lull. View of the eye, indicating, as we talked about, that the hurricane does tend to intensity, but it is absolutely dumb luck whether you happen to hit it on a low pulse or a high pulse as it comes ashore. And we can clearly see the bands there right on the edge of the storm are indeed the showers that we were showing you here on the radar just a moment ago. Why don't we look at that tracking map just one more time? And I hate to belabor all this because we have a storm 240 miles away with 150-mile-an-hour winds, and obviously 16 miles an hour. We're talking about 15 hours. We're just about 5 o'clock here. 5 o'clock, 15 hours from now puts it at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning in terms of the eye arriving.
But then you got to back up a little bit.
But then you got to back up, and we figure you have to back up about 6 hours, which puts us at 2 a.m. And so we're saying, to be sure, in case you run into some pretty good squalls that arrive before that, that everything that happens needs to happen by midnight tonight.
If you had someplace to go, if you're really, if you're a little bit behind and you're packing up your house and you're trying to secure it before you evacuate, can you drive from here to there tonight at midnight?
Yeah, I don't think the weather conditions will prevent you. It's the panicky people on the road that will prevent you, I think, more than anything else. The weather conditions by midnight tonight, as they are in the Bahamas.
From one house to another, if you got to go to a relative's house and it's midnight.
Ed Odell is over in the Bahamas, and they're going to be about 6 hours ahead of us as that goes by there. So it's the equivalent now of 11 o'clock our time in the Bahamas as far as the progress of the storm. And he's having no trouble maneuvering around Nassau, although the front of the storm is not at Nassau. Nassau is a little south of the center, so plus or minus an hour there.
Brian, we've been giving the phone numbers for the rumor control hotline for Dade County, and of course they've added some additional numbers. We also have some phone numbers right here at Channel 4 in our help center. If we can put those numbers up, people should know that they can call us right here at Channel 4. Those recorded messages they're getting on that, or is that in our help center where we have staffed people?
Well,
Brian?
I'll tell you the truth. Julie, tell me once again what you said about this.
Okay, these are phone numbers in our help center. Right. We have people who are there to answer your questions. Now, they can't tell you which shelter to go to and if the shelter's closed. Those crucial kind of emergency questions need to go to the rumor control hotline. But in the help center, and you see a live picture right now of our staff members taking phone calls, and we have a lot of people able to answer your questions. And those numbers at the bottom of your screen: in Dade County, 379-HELP. And in Broward County, 523-HELP, and we can direct you. What kind of people should be calling those numbers, Brian?
Well, I think that first of all, we've been putting up the addresses of the shelters, and I think that the most important thing we can do to help people here is give those addresses.
Shelter addresses. So if you've missed them, and if we're not giving them to you often enough, we'll give them to you. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we plan to do that again after 5 o'clock? We're going to check in with Bob Sheets at the Hurricane Center at 5 o'clock. And as soon as that's over, why don't we just make our commitment here in the 5 o'clock hour to go through those addresses, and anybody that has rethought their process, that now, okay, we're going to believe what they're saying, we're going to go. Right. That right after 5 o'clock here, that's what we're going to do is give you a place to go. But to get back to your question of who should call these numbers here, don't call and ask for a shelter address. We'll give that to you on the television. If you have some question that you're not in an evacuation area, and again, the questions like we've been trying to answer about people that live in high-rises out of the evacuation areas, if you have a specific issue about your neighborhood, anything like that that we might be able to address here that would answer your question and probably the question for many other people, that's the kind of calls we'd like to take in the help center. If you have emergency needs where you, for whatever reason, just having the address of the shelter is not sufficient for you to get there, either by using the mass transportation or by using a car or a friend or however you're going to get there. If that's not sufficient, then we're going to have to send you, most efficiently, send you out. Let's not put up this number here. We want to send them to the emergency hotline numbers at the
emergency operations centers. If we can put those numbers
up. Those are the rumor control numbers.
They were called rumor control, and we've relabeled them because they're really emergency hotlines. So these are for people that cannot evacuate on their own, have personal emergency problems, and just don't have anywhere else to turn. 595-6661 or 596-8735. We added numbers there in Dade County because of so many calls. In Broward, 357-8454. Monroe County, 800-427-8343. And we talked to Billy Wagner, and we haven't mentioned Monroe County in some time, and he was feeling good about the evacuation coming out of the Keys. They have ordered a full evacuation out of the Keys. But what's going to happen down there is they're going to stop the evacuation in 8 different places once they think that people are threatened with being caught on the road. So they won't allow people to get out there and get caught on the road. So they'll stop people from coming out of the lower Keys.
Right.
Because actually the way this storm is moving, the upper Keys and the middle Keys are more threatened than the lower Keys. So if you can't get out of the lower Keys, you're better off to be in the lower Keys than you are to get stuck in the upper Keys where the storm would be more intense. All right, it is 5 o'clock here, and Dr. Bob Sheets is standing by at the National Hurricane Center with the latest advisory. Let's go ahead and check in with Dr. Bob Sheets now in Coral Gables.
Good evening. Hurricane Andrew continues to move toward the west at near 16 miles per hour. Our latest hurricane reconnaissance aircraft has reported that the pressure remains steady at 922 millibars. That means the maximum winds are at 150 miles per hour. We expect little change in strength, maybe some slight fluctuations as it approaches the southeast coast of Florida. That impact will be felt along the coast near midnight tonight, with the biggest part of the impact, the strongest part of the storm, moving in near dawn tomorrow morning. I'm Bob Sheets from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida.
All right, thank you, Bob. Let's clarify here, because his timetable is a little different than we described. But we talked about the eye coming over sometime 7 or 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. But the most intense part of the storm is in advance of the eye. Maybe a couple hours, and that's why Broward County, and maybe another hour from the intense part of the storm approaching the Dade County coast. Bob Sheets, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
We're keeping the Miami radar up continuously here as much as we can, because I can't think of anything else that impresses on people that the storm is on our doorstep at this point. And if anybody has any last thoughts about finally getting off the beach or whatever, hopefully this will motivate them. We're seeing on the Miami radar, the live Miami radar, those yellow severe thunderstorms in that outer band. But what kind of winds that can we expect in there?
Well, the airplane shows about 75 to 80 mile per hour winds in this outer band right out here.
Bob, tell me that once again. I'm sorry, you were stepped onto my ear.
In this here outer band here, the airplane is showing about 75 to 80 mile per hour winds, and those bands that are coming along here. And then, of course, in here, that's the strongest part of the hurricane, right in the eye wall region, right around the eye there.
All right, we can see, if we can put up the live Miami radar, I know that you can't see our shot, but you're looking at a different thing there. On the west side of the eye, in other words, our side of the eye, we are seeing a semicircle of, looks to me like a VIP-3 there, at least. Of course, it's a long way out. That is indeed the eye wall, is it not?
This one out here, the VIP-3 that you're seeing all the way out here, that's getting fairly close to the coast here. The eye, that's some distance from the eye wall.
No, I'm talking about right around the eye. We can see a semicircle of at least VIP-3 and some VIP-4 in there, right around the eye itself.
That's the bigger eye there, that the about 20-mile kind of diameter of eye that you're seeing in there, and that's what you're seeing out there at a distance of about 130 miles or so.
All right, so the outer fringe there, where we're getting, I assume, tropical storm force winds in that first band that's approaching the coast. What do we have, about 15 or 20 miles offshore now? Is that about where you figure?
The outer fringe, yes, and about here 50 to 75 miles from the coast. That's where we're going to see those near hurricane force winds as those bands come across.
All right, so we're talking about 3 or 3.5 hours for that, based on a 15 or 16 mile an hour movement.
Somewhere around 2 a.m.
Okay. All right, Bob, once again, thank you very much, and we'll stay with you as long as we can here. All right.
We got a couple of notes while you were on the air with Bob. FP&L is advising us, which really comes as no surprise, that they're warning folks to expect your electricity to be off for a week. If you lose electricity, a week is what the ballpark figure that they're throwing out. And from what you have said, that would not be at all unusual.
No, as a matter of fact, just to say again, in Hurricane Betsy, the power was out in parts of the city here for about 8 days, and Hurricane Betsy was not even a hurricane in Dade County, except in extreme southern Dade County, but in Miami, Coral Gables, it was not of hurricane force. So, and that was 8 days, although we have, I guess, made some advancements in that area since then, but still, you can just imagine the task. First of all, before any work can be done.
An impressive radar. We're looking at South Florida. PBI is West Palm Beach, MIA is Miami, and EYW at the bottom of the screen is Key West. To the east of Miami, we see the eye very, very clearly. The westward motion, as you can see, continues, and the storm gets closer and closer to Miami. Already the outer bands beginning to affect Miami, and that's where we want to go live now. Dennis Smith, the Weather Channel's Dennis Smith, is standing by in Coral Gables, Florida. Dennis, the story there.
The story continues to be a slow increase. The stars that we talked about an hour ago have long disappeared. We have the cloudiness moving in. In fact, I guess only a meteorologist could appreciate this. We were watching some of the low-level clouds continue to zip around, almost following like one of the bands wrapping around from the west and moving back towards the southeast, and seeing more building up in the northeast, so kind of wrapping or circulating around us. We haven't seen any major rain problems, a few spits of rain over the last 1 hour period. For the most part, the dramatic increase in the winds. Now they're pretty steady at about 20, occasionally gusting up to about 40 miles an hour, and they continue to step on up as we see Andrew getting closer and closer. Where you have on the radar MIA, we are just a little bit farther to the south, so we're watching that eye very closely, and as it gets very, very close to the coast, it looks like our position may be on the southern end of that eye, or perhaps very close to the center of it. So we're going to keep a close on it with you and keep you updated on exactly what's going on. But for the most part, the most dramatic increase has been in the winds, Keith.
Dennis, it's 1 o'clock in the morning down there. Anybody out on the streets? Do you see any sign of life out there?
In fact, our crew had to go out on the streets for a little bit for a gasoline situation, and the gas stations were still open. At least one of them, that's all we needed to fill up the tank. So we're a much better situation there. But yes, there is a little bit, but it's really creeping now. I mean, it's down to a crawl, and anybody that's generally out and about is usually the sheriff or the police department or an occasional fire department car or something like that. But for the most part, things have really quieted down.
All right, Dennis Smith, that's Weather Channel's Dennis Smith reporting live from Coral Gables, Florida. We will continue to check in with him through the evening, and of course, as the weather permits. John, the barometric pressure, John Hope joining me now, has gone up just a little bit. What do you think?
It's been doing that slowly. I don't really look for much more change, though, just in a few hours before it makes landfall. It's pretty remarkable, Keith, that latitude stays exactly the same, 25.4. And if that doesn't change, the very center of the eye, the geometric center, will come in not very far from Homestead. And, of course, that's going to put Kendall and Coral Gables and Key Biscayne, Cutler Ridge, South Miami, right in the very dangerous northern semicircle of the hurricane.
What about the rest of the Gold Coast as we head up through Fort Lauderdale and West Palm?
Well, as you get north of Fort Lauderdale and up toward West Palm, the winds should be gradually less, but still pretty strong winds and still pretty high tides. But the highest tides will be farther south, and the highest winds will be farther south.
So it looks like this still a Category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, continues to head toward the coast. Tides will be rising and the weather deteriorating?
Yes, as you can see on the radar, the squalls are just getting in there now, and they'll be coming in with a vengeance down the next few hours, and the winds will increase, the rain will increase, and the tides come up a little bit, and then a whole lot just about the time the eye gets there.
Okay, that's the east coast and the southeast coast of Florida. What's going to happen there right along the west coast from Fort Myers, say, south?
Okay, Fort Myers, unless there's some big change in the course here, it looks as if they would be north of where the eye comes out over the water, which means that their winds will be basically from the east. Now, what we're afraid of in an exiting storm such as this one is where the wind is southwest. In other words, south of where the eye crosses the coast. It looks as if that will be just in the extreme southern
Broward and Palm Beach County over to Monroe County. We look from Miami due east, and here is the eye of the hurricane. Right around the eye, that intense-looking area, that is the eye wall. That's where the most intense weather is going to be, especially from the eye and north. Notice how this motion is continuing toward the west. That motion is expected to continue, which is likely to make the landfall right in this area. So as we head from Homestead northward, that's where most of the destruction is likely to be. We have a crew down there in Coral Gables, Florida. Dennis Smith, the weather seems to be heading downhill there. What's the latest?
Keith, we're continuing to experience a worsening condition in the weather pattern right here. Once again, squalls of rain are coming on through. If you remember, early in the evening, we had a benchmark. It was a flag that we were watching to see how the direction was flipping around, as well as the wind speed. I don't think we can be using that anymore. It's about torn up and about ready to come off. Give you an idea of how strong the winds have picked up over the last couple of hours. Again, the rain, they're coming in as one would expect in a tropical situation, in squalls, where we'll go through a period of very heavy rain, then loosens up a little bit. We're just kind of spitting right now, but I can hear the winds picking up behind me. We've seen the characteristic pops of blue that we experienced when we went through Hurricane Hugo, and that's the power lines snapping off the transformers or the poles themselves, and we've seen a lot of that in the distance. Fortunately, we still have power and we're still up and broadcasting, but that may be a situation that we need to be concerned with in the future, is the strength of these winds and what they may do to our power. We've seen and heard about some reports of damage around the Pompano Beach area, mainly from trees down, and also some damage from roofing being stripped back and the such, but no major damage reported in the area of South Miami, or excuse me, the southeast coast near Miami over the last 1 hour. But again, we're keeping a very close eye on Andrew as it continues to move towards the west.
Beach at Boca Raton. The last time we saw him, the wind was blowing very, very strong. Well, it's even worse now. Gary, tell us about it.
Well, Dave, it's nights like this that make you marvel at the power of Mother Nature. Since we talked to you about a half hour ago, the conditions have deteriorated markedly. Right now, the winds are coming in reportedly at 60 miles per hour. And a lot of people here in the southern Palm Beach County area, this is Boca Raton, thought that it wouldn't be that bad. They heard the center of the storm was going to be passing over Dade County. But if the center of the storm is passing over Dade County, which it's going to be very soon in the next few hours, you fooled a lot of people here who haven't been through a hurricane before, who don't realize that the northwest quadrant of the storm, which is coming over Boca Raton, inflicts a lot of fury of its own. And that's what it's doing right now. Meteorologists in the area say this area is being hit harder than most other areas in Florida at this very moment. The rain is coming down very heavy. Only a little over 3 hours ago, it was calm. It's like 5-mile-an-hour winds. There was no rain. And as we've told you before, it fooled a lot of people here. A lot of people decided not to leave when they saw that conditions weren't that bad. But right now, it's extremely dangerous. Police are doing their best right now in the streets of Boca Raton, the streets of Boynton Beach and Delray Beach, the streets of Deerfield Beach, which is in Broward County, just to the south of here, trying to get people off the roads, off the beach areas, off the barrier islands that make up Southeast Florida. One of the major problems here is that people in Southeast Florida still talk about Hurricane Betsy in 1965 and Hurricane David in 1979 as terrible calamities, and indeed they were. They killed a lot of people, but they weren't direct hits here in South Florida. South Florida's gone decades without a direct hit from a hurricane. Tomorrow morning, they're going to be getting a direct hit. Right now, even though the hurricane is still 100 miles or more off the coast of Florida, the conditions are very dangerous. So that's the situation right here in Boca Raton. This is Gary Tuckman, CNN Live, Boca Raton, Florida. Dave?
Gary, whatever that weather jacket you have, you're about to lose it, obviously. You've increased in wind speed about 10 miles an hour just from the last half hour we talked to you. Now, I know you're on the beach itself, but is it as bad inland from where you are?
That's a good question, Dave. It's not as bad inland. If you go 5 or 6 miles inland, even 2 or 3 miles, it's not nearly as windy, and that's why it's very sensible advice, common sense. Go inland 2 or 3 miles. Go to a friend's home. Go somewhere where it's a lot safer, because anywhere near the coast is very dangerous. And please excuse this coat I'm wearing here. This wasn't the biggest investment I made, unfortunately. My other raincoat got lost, and that's what happens. The buttons have all broken on this coat, so I'm sorry to be so distracted.
Considering the conditions you're in, Gary, you're doing very well. Thank you, Gary Tuckman of Boca Raton. Brian.
Power, moving a lot of water on shore. You get the moon and the tides adding to that, the height of the water. So as Dr. Sheets, I believe, said a moment ago, it adds about a foot, maybe more, to the storm surge. At 5:01, the high tide will be reached at Miami Harbor, and in addition to that, it looks like the storm will be making its full force felt on the shore at approximately that time. Look at the storm now. It's tracked now to the west at 17 miles an hour. It would appear that as it is getting into the Gulf Stream, it's picking up a little bit of intensity. Right now, maximum sustained winds running about 125 miles an hour, maybe a little bit more than that. And by the way, for our international viewers, the storm center is within 60 miles now of the shore of Miami, and that translates to about 96, 97 kilometers. You can see the storm as it's making its progress towards the shore. And Brian, as you pointed out earlier too, keep in mind that the west coast, the Gulf Coast of Florida, is also under a warning. It's very, very important to remember that this storm is going to travel right across Florida. It could pick up a little more strength as we get into the Gulf Stream the next hour to 3 hours. It could pick up some devastating damage to southeastern Florida, primarily in the Miami Beach area, and on to the south. Again, we're talking pressure here of 936 millibars. If you were with us a couple of hours ago, we were talking as much as 941 to 947. It has now deepened once again, apparently, and this is a pretty good accurate reading of your central pressure. As they dropped, the recon plane dropped a sounding in there and found exactly that pressure. 27.64 inches. We have sustained winds now, 140 miles per hour, and a westward motion at 17 miles per hour. And as John Hope was saying just a few minutes ago, this hurricane has been on 25.4 north for a very long time. It is making a beeline for the Florida coast at the present time. Within 60 miles of the coast, 25.4 north, 79.3 west. And that will bring it on to perhaps 10 to 20 miles north just of the eye wall. So that's why we're especially concerned about South Miami.
Being west at near 18 miles per hour, seems to be accelerating. It is currently 40 miles east of Miami, which means landfall within the next 2 hours. I'm now joined by our specialist, our hurricane specialist, John Hope. John, a major hurricane about to make landfall.
Yes, you're right. It won't be any more than 2 hours. So the weather Dennis has right there is going to get a lot worse. It's going to do that in a hurry. And certainly the full fury of the hurricane will be in there within 2 hours.
What can we expect now that the hurricane's about to make landfall? As it moves to the west coast of Florida, what can they expect?
Well, it's going to move across the state, a very narrow portion of the state, and do so pretty rapidly. And it may diminish slightly as it goes over land, but it's not going to be over there long enough to make much difference. And just as soon as it hits the Gulf of Mexico, it will gain back most of what it lost, I believe.
And then once it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, it looks like it's going to hit inland someplace later this week.
Yes, I think there's not much doubt about that. Now, we haven't been able to pinpoint the spot yet, but folks up there along the northern Gulf Coast certainly want to watch this very, very carefully.
Okay, I want to go back to this radar if we could and ask you a couple of questions. Here's the eye. Why is it so bright right around the eye itself?
Okay, that is the eye wall that we see there, and that is the
So for the Boca Raton area is supposed to reach the mark of about 4, 6, possibly 8 feet. We went down onto the beach a little while ago. We were standing about 15 feet away from the edge of the water, and at that point, one wave came right up and came right over our ankles, really almost up to our knees. It just washed right past us. So there's apparently no telling when it is that some of the strongest waves and some of the strongest water is going to come.
Control room that they're ready to go.
Yeah.
Whenever we are ready to go. So I'll tell you what, why don't we get our maps together, and why don't you folks at home. There, John? Okay, great. We'll get our maps together so that we can continue with specific information, and theoretically, we're going to be set to be in exactly the same situation that we are here, and just I've had these maps for a long time. Any stupid hurricane out there.
Properly, even as a category 4 hurricane is making its way toward us.
We can hear it clearly. I know you folks at home can't hear it, but clearly we can hear it outside. Let me see. I'm all wireless. I'll tell you what, maybe, Raphael, you could find a couple batteries here to bring in here as we go in here so that we don't run out of power. Although we're going to, I guess Tony has a mic in here that we can use no matter what happens battery-wise.
Here we are, Brian. We're all set. We're all set. I'll tell you what, this is the safest spot, without a doubt, here at the station. As you mentioned, it is all cement enclosed. In fact, John, you can just widen out just a minute. We can tell people where we are. This is an old equipment storage room here. In fact, you can see a lot of the old WTVJ equipment, wires and light fixtures being hung. And as Brian indicated, this is
a little bit lighter in nature as we head into the heart of the storm. The Dolphins have called off all of their practices. Coach Shula said that Yes, they have a game coming up on Thursday, but nothing is more important than the players' families, and told them that just take time off, ride this storm out with the families as best they can, and they'll make new plans getting ready for their game on Thursday in Baltimore as the storm goes past. So we sent Steve Shapiro up to Joe Robbie Stadium, where, believe it or not, the players don't have to be there, but Joe Robbie Stadium is a fairly safe place to be. Here's Steve's report.
Of Charleston experienced a Category 2 hurricane. Well, the eye was bigger there, and that narrow band of damage was 20 miles displaced from the eye, and it happened to hit in the Francis Marion National Forest, which is a huge national forest north of Charleston, the only place on the entire east coast of the United States that's not inhabited.
Is that right?
The one and only place. The reason that Hurricane Hugo was not anywhere near as devastating a storm as it deserved to be based on its size and strength is because it happened to hit that little narrow thing, threaded the needle into that little narrow spot, that little slot on the coast. Now, clearly tonight that is not happening. That little narrow band is threading the needle on the city of Miami.
At this point, is there any chance that it could move a little further north or a little further south, or is it just too close to the coast now and it's going to move?
There's certainly a chance it could move a little further north, a little further south, and we can see, look at the bands back behind the storm and on top of the storm, is showing yellow in them as well.
Right.
So as they rotate up through Broward, we're not in any way saying that Broward is not going to get hurt for hurricane force conditions and not going to have damage here. Okay. We're not saying that at all, but what we are saying is that the most intense part of the storm, I think without any question, is going to occur in Dade County.
Okay, we got a caller from South Dade near 112th Street and 71st Avenue, east of US 1, about a mile from the Parrot Jungle, said the entire area is now blacked out, power completely gone. It happened, I guess, about an hour ago, according to the caller. The caller also said strong winds, a lot of lightning,
right, well,
and heavy thunderstorms and sheets of rain coming in at quite a clip.
We just lost one channel of the ADO, it looks like to me here, because we're...
I can also tell you, I just spoke with my house in Davie, and they have been without power for the past hour, and they have yet to hit real strong winds. They have a lot of rain, but not a lot of winds, but they've already lost some power, and I guess we also saw from Dave Bloom that Hallandale has lost power.
Power off. What's going on there, John? You know?
I'm going to go see if we're on.
And we're still on. If we have lost our signal on WTVJ, we are still on Y100. And
yeah, we need to. I tell you what. Can you turn on Y100 there just to be sure we're still on the air on the radio over there, John?
Again, we are going to stick with you as long as we possibly can.
Yeah, we're still on Y100.
We're still on with Y100. So if you can't see us, because we are now, again, still trying to bring equipment in here to see if we are on the air.
John, why don't you go ahead and see if you can figure out what exactly is going on
but
here.
We can tell the people through the radio exactly how far... Oh, we are on the air. Okay, we are on the air. Okay.
All right, John, we're going to go ahead and try and sort out what's happened, because what apparently happened is we have emergency generating equipment here, but during the transition from the FP&L power to our emergency power, sometimes a little disruption. Apparently it's affected our video, and that's why your video screen is a little out of whack. But we want to preserve our fuel in our emergency generators because we feel certain that we're going to need it here tomorrow, so that we can operate properly. And so we want to try and use FP&L as long as we can here. So it is disruptive to us, though, when they do take a hit and we lose the power, at least temporarily.
6:30 a.m.?
No, I think we're talking before that now.
6 o'clock, probably?
Or before that, even.
Really?
We're on the air now. Thank you, George.
It is now 3:45, so we're looking at another 2 hours. 3:39.
3:39.
Okay. 3:39.
We're looking at, well, we can see that right below our picture there, the strong part of the storm is approaching the very tip there of, right where the scan is right now. That's the very tip of Elliott Key. Now, right below you, you see that little tail of the yellow hanging out. No, over the see the red there.
Yep.
the red area is the part of the area is not, we don't know what's in there because that's being masked by the radar. But just below that, that yellow area, that's the intense part. Okay, all right. All right, well, we'll go ahead and just punch it up, and when we get it, we'll talk about what we see. But the yellow area there's just below the red blob in the middle is the area that
it's
is
just they're changing the radar a little bit here, but still the storm is maintaining strength, and we do have an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft investigating the area, and they say that the storm is maintaining strength. That means top sustained winds still 140 miles per hour. A little bit later today, the storm may lose just a little bit of punch since it's going to be over land, but it should re-strengthen once it makes its way off the southwest coast of Florida. That's a little bit later. This here is Dade County, and it's going to slide through central Dade County over toward Collier County, Everglades City.
Coming up, a look at your
right now, so it's calm under that eye. But up to the north, we've had reports out of the Hurricane Center, which is just on the northern side of this here in Coral Gables, of sustained winds at 115 miles an hour with gusts up to 152. That is very close to where Dennis Smith is right now. Dennis, give us the latest on what you're experiencing. Obviously quite a bit.
Yes, we certainly are. In fact, the winds continue to blow us around, and I could pretty well verify that we've probably seen that 120 plus even here. We've had, over the last hour, a lot of the roofing around the particular structure we're in getting peeled off. We've heard some more glass shattering. Again, we haven't been with power for a couple of hours now, and the winds have just dramatically come up. You reported the Hurricane Center, which is not too far from where we're at, had a peak gust of 152. We have seen palm trees literally bend in one direction and snap back up, upright again. We've heard and seen some of the tree limbs snapping. I'm kind of getting a sandblasted effect because of the pebbles on the roof are kind of being blown around as well. We have not experienced any calmness, though. I mean, it has been continuous increase in the winds. So as far as our exact position in relation to the eye is kind of hard to determine, but we are starting to feel the winds shift around a little bit. They were coming from my left to your right, my left to right, and now kind of coming at my back and coming a little bit occasionally from my right. So we're getting the gustiness, and we're also getting the shift in the winds taking place. But as you pointed out, I think we're just about at the peak we're gonna feel in the Coral Gables area right now. Jim?
All right, Dennis, thank you very much. John Hope joins us now, and John, obviously he's right in the middle of things.
The full fury of the hurricane is there now. That's as bad as just about as it's going to get, because they've already had gusts over 150 miles an hour at the National Hurricane Center, which is right there near where Dennis is. And we've had reports just offshore at Bowery Rocks. The sustained wind was 140 miles an hour with gusts of 160. So it is a good Category 4 hurricane. It is making landfall. It's sped up a little bit now. It's going a little bit faster than it was, so it's going to be racing across the southern tip of the state and affect the communities on the other side. Naples, for example, Marco Island. They'll be north of the center, I think, so their winds are going to be offshore. And the onshore winds south of the eye, as it emerges on the west coast, are going to be down pretty much in non-populated areas. But it's going to race across there and do a lot of devastation, especially underneath that eye wall.
Now, what about storm surge? Biscayne
Storm
Bay
surge
right
is
there.
the other thing. Of course, we'll have to wait and see how high it got, but it's coming in right at the time of high tide. We are fearful that they'll have as much as 13 feet above normal in right there in Biscayne Bay, and that could do a lot of damage as well. And on Key Biscayne, these big ocean waves are coming in on top of the high tide generated by the hurricane. A lot of damage potential there, too.
We got a new advisory in just before we went on the air. The pressure went down to 932 millibars. Was there some strengthening before it made
Oh, yes, there was. There had been some weakening early in the evening. Of course, we were down to 922 millibars pressure and 150 mile-an-hour winds at one time, and then it dropped off. But just as the hurricane was approaching land, it got better organized once again, and I think the winds picked up just a bit.
All right. Thank you very much, John Hope. We'll continue to
head on, right?
Yes, it looked like it was bearing down on the Cutler Ridge to Homestead area. We were in the eye wall here. We had 165 mile per hour winds here at the National Hurricane Center.
In the eye, is it completely calm?
Relatively calm, and it can last for several minutes depending on the speed of forward motion. The most dangerous part is the eye wall.
That's the rim of the circle.
Yes, sir. That's where the most damage occurred, and that's where you've heard a lot of tremendous damage reports in the Kendall area and south of there.
Was there damage to the center?
We lost our radome, radar, all the antennas off the roof. Cars were lifted up and placed on top of cars. We had appreciable damage in the area.
Hal, I know they rate hurricanes 1 through 5. If this is not a 5, what's a 5?
That's a good question. Actually, as far as our pressure measurements were concerned, it was a very strong Category 4 hurricane strengthening at landfall. Previously, it was almost a Category 5 east of the Bahamas. According to the damage, you would think it was a 5.
All right, now you were dead on right. This came right out of the Atlantic, hit right into South Florida on the southeastern coast, and now it's in the Gulf. What do your forecasts tell you now?
Our recent reconnaissance reports indicate that it's still a Category 4 hurricane, a strong Category 4 hurricane, and we expect it to gradually turn to the northwest and focus in perhaps on the Louisiana area. There's some uncertainties in the track, but at least we anticipate hurricane conditions in the north-central Gulf Coast area tomorrow night.
Are you then calling, or will you ask local communities to call for evacuations, Mississippi beaches, Louisiana beaches into Texas?
They'll be making those decisions there in the local area. We just issue the warnings, and based on the warnings, they'll be making those decisions. We do have a hurricane warning in effect from Pascagoula, Mississippi, westward to Vermilion Bay.
Now, those areas are somewhat even more open than where this hit in Miami, aren't they? I mean, they're right on the beach.
Right, and it takes a long time to evacuate that area. The New Orleans area hasn't been hit by Category 4 hurricanes since 1915. So we have a lot of concern for that area, as we do for any area here at the National Hurricane Center.
What, how was Hugo?
Hugo was a Category 4, and it was about the intensity this was making landfall in the Miami area, so far as we know. There were several hours, though, that we do not have measurements of pressure just before landfall, and I think it was a little slightly stronger than Hugo at landfall.
So it's a wide swath here. You don't know where it's going to hit, but the best bet is Louisiana at this point.
At this point. Now, if it speeds up a little bit more than it's moving about 18 miles per hour now, it might slide a little bit westward toward the Texas coast. But we feel like that the atmospheric steering currents are going to be changing in the next 12 hours or so and tend to turn it more northward toward the Louisiana area.
Thanks very much, Hal. Charles, yes, one other question for you. People would
look like it is moving northwest, but it's moving just north of due west. Still packing winds of 140 miles an hour. This is a very dangerous storm. It's a Category 4 hurricane. It has lost none of its punch since it made landfall this morning just south
of course, in this instance, we're talking not far from a Category 5 hurricane, the strongest category, at least in terms of hurricane strength. We have not had too many hurricanes this century in the Gulf of Mexico that have been any stronger than what Andrew is right now. Andrew continuing to work its way just a little bit north of due westerly. If it were to keep going on its current course, you can see we'd have problems here along the upper Texas Gulf Coast.
To gradually move to the west, northwest, and then northwest. I'm hearing reflections of my voice in here. Okay, and then gradually approach the Gulf Coast of Mexico, or the Gulf Coast there in the vicinity of Louisiana. We've nudged the warnings a little bit west to include the entire coastline of Louisiana. Latest guidance indicates we might have a little bit nudge to the west, and if so, that would take New Orleans out of the immediate threat. We're evaluating that today and focusing a little bit later this morning.
Dr. Garish, what sort of timetable are we talking about here?
Well, it looks like the models that we have indicate that we might have the steering currents weakening and slowing down during the day today. Right now we have it moving in the vicinity of 17 miles per hour. We're thinking perhaps in terms of the next 24 hours or so.
Okay, Dr. Garish, thanks for joining us this morning. Dr. Hal Garish at the National...
9.2 degrees west, that's 175 miles south-southeast of New Orleans, but notice New Orleans is up here, so much of the Louisiana coast still getting closer and closer to the storm. Winds 140 miles per hour. It's moving toward the west-northwest at 17 miles per hour, and the pressure still down at 944 millibars. There's the latest satellite picture, and again, you can see the coast of Louisiana very, very well here, all the way from Lake Pontchartrain, that's north. That's north of the New Orleans area. Down to the south, you can see a few spiral bands coming in, and south-southeast New Orleans, that's where the eye is. It's a little larger now than it was earlier today, but that does not indicate that the storm is weakening, and as that motion is expected to continue, hurricane warnings continue from Pascagoula, Mississippi, westward. Now they extend as far west as Bolivar Peninsula there. Galveston to the south, hurricane watches, and from Pascagoula on toward the east to Mobile Bay, including the Mobile area, we have a hurricane watch as well. I'm now joined by our hurricane expert here at the Weather Channel, John Hope. John, this is a major hurricane, is it not?
Yeah, it certainly is. It's a Category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, and it's not much different than it was when it hit South Florida, so it is very, very bad hurricane, and the winds are going to be higher. We're even more concerned about the storm surge in Louisiana than we were in Florida. Now, the winds are 140 miles an hour. We saw in South Florida what kind of damage that wind could do.
So we can expect the same type of damage in the Louisiana area?
We can expect a lot of wind damage and more storm surge damage than we saw in South Florida.
And the key here is where the eye moves inland,
Exactly.
Correct?
It'll be where the eye crosses the coast, and to the right of that, which in this case would be toward the northeast, that's where the highest storm surge would be.
Here's the eye right here?
Right. And this is getting, as you indicated, in pretty close. It's less now than 130 miles, the center is, from Grand Isle, and we've already seen gusts of wind over 60 miles an hour here at Southwest Pass, over 60 miles an hour here at Southwest Pass at the mouth of the Mississippi River.
So a lot of the emergency management folks have already recommended mandatory evacuations for a number of parishes in Louisiana, and as that occurs, you say everything should be done right now as fast as possible.
You must do it right now. You have to do this in the daytime. You don't want to wait till after dark, and the conditions are getting so bad already down at the mouth of the Mississippi, around Boothville and such places as that. It'll be too late before long to take action.
Okay, and up to the northwest of there around Lafayette, this is the story as folks say, okay, hurricane's coming, prepare by getting lots of bottled water. They head to the stores, get food, water, flashlight batteries, radio batteries, and of course boarding up windows and preparing for the onslaught of the hurricane.
The intensities here in terms of yellows and some of the darker greens that all of a sudden we see in the very last couple of frames here. Note the eye, at least part of the eye wall, having moved onshore southwestern sections of Terrebonne Parish, pretty close to the Mosquito Bay area. Tremendous winds and rains here as this is moving onshore.
Coming up. House. Well, it looks like it's maybe wobbling a little bit. We'll have to watch it for the next several hours to see exactly if it's making a change in its direction of movement or it's just in a bit of a wobble mode. Notice all the reds and oranges earlier. In fact, the orange and red now decreasing, indicating the cloud tops, the coldest cloud tops, are warming. Probably a sign that the storm is weakening somewhat. This is certainly not by any means time to let your guard down and getting a false sense of security, but it's likely as the storm makes landfall, it will not pick up any more steam. Winds now 140 miles an hour. It's still a very dangerous Category 4 storm. We saw what it did in southern sections of Florida and Dade County just yesterday morning. We'll check out the radar and give you a better idea of the rainfall so far. Just in the past hour, a wind gust to 47 miles an hour at New Orleans International Airport. There's the eye of the storm. This is Terrebonne Parish. This is Marsh Island, Vermilion Bay, and Atchafalaya Bay right here. It seems to be maybe wobbling a little bit to the more to the west than north. Also notice the speed has slowed down just a notch or two over the past several hours, delaying landfall. But these southern areas of Terrebonne Parish obviously getting hurricane-force winds. Reports that travel has been cut off. If you live south of I-10, you need to evacuate if you already haven't. Travel south of Interstate 10 is certainly discouraged. Do not travel south of I-10. Already reports from the Morgan City area of power outages and some wind damage, and our reporter down there reporting debris being blown around as he was traveling up Highway 90. There's the extent of the rainfall, and of course a lot of rain with a slow movement of the storm. It could be some serious flooding problems as we get on through tomorrow. Here are the particulars on Andrew as it stands right now. Winds 140 miles an hour, moving northwest at 13 miles an hour. We'll have another update in the next 45 minutes. Pressure 945.
As it's moved onshore into Louisiana now, we're starting to lose a lot of that. So we're starting to see perhaps just a little bit in the way of some weakening. Latest particulars on Andrew, centered at 29 north, 91.2 west, 95 miles south-southeast of Lafayette, Louisiana. Now, as of this advisory, which is the 11 p.m. advisory, the winds were 140 miles per hour. That will be updated in the next half hour, and we do believe that the Hurricane Center is going to lower those maximum sustained winds. Moving northwest at 13, that also may slow down, and the pressure now up to 951 millibars. Again, it is bumping right along the coast here of Terrebonne Parish, taking its time. On our last radar imagery, we kind of lost a lot of it there, but you can definitely see in the images before that, the eye was getting very close here to the southern coastal areas, Terrebonne Parish. And to be sure, Terrebonne Parish has really been lashed with a lot of very, very heavy winds and a lot of rain down there. Now, on this particular infrared satellite picture there, again, you can see the eye. This is the Texas Gulf Coast. This is southern Louisiana. That is the eye right now, and you can see that it's right on shore and taking its time moving onshore. Now, we have had some reports of some tornadoes with Andrew as it's continued to move to the north. One in particular, very tragic incident, evidently at the Red Cross shelter where some people had been evacuated to. There were 9 injuries as a tornado ripped through that shelter. That was in Laplace, which is just west of the New Orleans area. So very tragic. And we've had a couple of other reports of some tornadoes from Andrew. Some storms you get more reports of tornadoes than others, and this one particularly, we didn't have a lot of reports of that down in Florida. Of course, there was a lot of devastating wind damage anyway, but as it comes on into Louisiana, evidently we're seeing more of that in the way of some tornadic activity. Now,